Great. Welcome everyone to the Friday seminar for Trek. This is our last seminar of the spring, so we look forward to seeing you again in the fall. Today we're hearing from Adam McAvick, Director of Business Development at Movil North America. Adam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Seems like a pretty good turnout here to hear about the future of fare collection. It is it's kind of maybe seems like a dry subject. So I work for Movil North America. Any of you ride TriMet, if you've ever used the TriMet Tickets app, that's our product. If you have problems with it, call our customer service. I think it's a pretty good product. We're very proud of it. We are a technology company working to make cities smarter. So I'm here today to talk about fare collection. Like I said, it probably seems like a pretty dry subject, but I will tell you that's not the case when you work with fare collection. It's extremely absorbing. It's like the mob. You never get out. Once you're in, you generally stay there. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about me, kind of how I got here, why I'm here talking to you. I got into transportation back in '93 because I couldn't get a job as a land use planner. Transportation was about all I could do. So I had a job at a small consulting firm. I went around the country doing transportation development plans for rural communities, special needs transportation, specialized transportation. If you Google my name, all my publications are from the 90s, old stuff. But it was really exciting. In about 2001, I got a job at a place called the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which I'm sure nobody's heard of. It's a planning body in Northern Virginia, but what was exciting to me was they appointed the Metro board members from Virginia, and I would get to work with Metro. This is the Washington, D.C. Metro. This is, to me, still just about the coolest thing out there for transportation. I was 7 when it opened. I rode it on the first day. It was like taking an escalator into the future. The vaulted ceilings, the minimalist design, the granite floors. I mean, it was just the neatest thing. And I was super excited to go there and work with Metro. Little did I know. And so my first day at that job, I was hired with another planner. The other 2 planners had left, and they had arranged on this big conference table, they put all of their project materials in piles with a label next to it. And the biggest pile was called the Smart Trip Project. And this was the smart card fare collection system at the DC Metro, which was going to be rolled out to the little regional transportation operators. And I wanted to impress my boss. I said, I'll take the biggest pile, I'll take this one on. And that's how I got into fare collection. And I've been there ever since. And like I said, it's very tough to get out. That project took 6 years. Around about 2008, it's all done. The system is accepted. The contracts are transferred over to the regional operators. I'm finished. I want to go back to being a transportation planner now, but the phone calls never stopped. Adam, they want us to sign this long-term maintenance contract. Guys, I'm not doing this anymore, right? But they knew me. They kept asking questions. Well, here's what we're thinking. 2 minutes later, I'm in a full-scale argument with them about what they should do. And this just kept going on and on and on. And finally, I realized I should just stick with fare collection. So 2010, I went to work at WMATA as the Director of Customer Service for Sales and Fare Media. Really great sounding job title. What that means is I was responsible for the fare payment and purchase experience for 1.2 million daily transactions. And that's exactly as fun as it sounds, okay? All the customer service operations, right? All the craziest, angriest customers, that's the only ones I ever talked to. They had to go all the way up the food chain to me. I was responsible for the customer experience, for buying the fare media, for distributing the fare media, for selling the fare media, and truly, that's the best experience possible because I learned everything there is to learn about customers, right? What they like, what they love, what they hate, what makes them go crazy. I also learned about all of the little hidden costs and challenges associated with fare collection. So I've been in transit 24 years. I've been in fare collection 16 years, 2.5 years at Movil. What are we going to talk about today? So like any good discussion of the future, we're going to start with a discussion of the past. I'm going to quickly walk you through a history of fare collection since the beginning of time. And we're going to move on to kind of the current day, some of the emerging trends that we're seeing, and then just maybe we'll get to talk about the future of fare collection. So in the beginning, let's go back to the start. I have a picture of a ferry boat there, because this is, in my imagination, that's the first kind of transportation that anyone ever paid for, was a ferry boat, right? Back in the Middle Ages or before that, 99% of the population never moved more than 3 miles from the place where they were born. If you needed to get somewhere and you didn't have a horse, you walked. But you couldn't walk across a river. And most people didn't have boats. And eventually somebody got the idea, well, wait a second, these people keep asking me to take them across the river. I'm going to start charging them money. So that was the first kind of transportation that people paid for. And this, I mean, the legend goes way back. That's a picture of Charon or Charon, the ferryman who took the damned across the river Styx to the underworld. And the custom was for thousands of years, when somebody died, you put a coin in their mouth to pay the ferryman. And of course, coming from transit fare collection, my first thought was, you wonder how they handled fare evasion, right? I mean, you're going to hell. What are they telling you? You can't go, right? You don't have any money, you can't go. How exactly do you deal with that, right? So I actually found out that if you didn't have the coin, you had to wander the far shore of hell for 100 years. Kind of puts that $175 fine on TriMet in perspective a little bit, you know. So the coin is the oldest form of fare payment. It's the first form, it's the oldest form, and it's the only form of fare payment that is accepted on every single bus in the United States, everywhere you go. Nobody has yet eliminated cash and coins on the bus. Nobody's done it. It's really, really, really hard to do. There's a lot of advantages to it. I mean, coins are tough. Dollars can get ripped, yeah, but coins are tough. They're pretty robust. Dollars can still get wet. They can still be used. It's pretty easy to validate. You know, 20, 30 years ago, your coin receptors didn't work all the time. Bill validators were kind of tricky. They work really well right now. So it's pretty easy to validate that stuff. But, you know, there's a lot of drawbacks with cash collection. Number one is the cost to collect. It costs a lot of money to deal with cash. One of the agencies I worked with, we did a really exhaustive, comprehensive study. How much do you spend to collect fares? How much do you spend to collect the money? And we found out for every dollar of cash, it was 11.8 cents to collect that cash. And that happened to be a really, really efficient cash collection operation. You're talking about just emptying ticket vending machines into trains, and it doesn't get any more efficient than that. Most agencies are probably spending 13, 14 cents per dollar to collect cash. That's why people want to limit the cash collected, okay? In addition to some other reasons, like people steal it, okay? Have any of you ever seen what a coin room looks like at a transit agency? Cash room? I bet you haven't, because they don't really tell you where those revenue facilities are. They keep it secret. I've been inside these places. It's unbelievable. I mean, number one, you can't bring anything with you. No bag, no briefcase, no nothing. You can't have any pockets. You literally have to put on a jumpsuit, okay, with no pockets that zips up to your neck. And you go in there and there's a gigantic table and there's people sitting around that table with big rakes, and they dump just huge vaults of cash, and you're raking that stuff over and stacking it up. I mean, seems kind of primitive, right? Certainly seems expensive to me. So this is why people want to get away from cash. And in addition, on the operational side of things, you can't really do much with cash. You can't have your cash or your coin can't act as a pass product. You can't do transfers with that. You have to give people a piece of paper. So there's a lot of reasons people are moving away from cash. But there were cash alternatives going back a really, really, really long time. I like to imagine to myself that thousands of years ago, somebody was on a ferry boat in the middle of a river, and he had a bag full of gold coins, and he looked around him, and there's a boat full of armed strangers, and they're looking at that bag of gold coins, and he's like, wow, I'm about to get robbed. This was a really bad idea. And he thought to himself, hey, you know what? What if we collected the money at the house and we gave them some sort of token to indicate that they've paid. And then I can just collect the tokens on the boat, and these don't have any value, and nobody's going to want to rob me. Now, it's a nice story. It's not really true. I mean, people use tokens to pay to get into temples way back in time. They use tokens to get into brothels in ancient Rome. So tokens have been around forever, but I like my story better. So the token started to come into prominence with ferry boat service and later with transit service. It's the second oldest form of fare payment. And what's important about the token, okay, this was the first time people started thinking about fare collection and how to improve and optimize it. So when you're paying with cash, right, the point of sale, the point of validation, the point of entry into the system, it's all in one place, right? With the token, we've now separated the point of sale over here. It's a very important step. In fact, basically still with us today, this same exact model. But that was kind of the real importance of the token, was to start thinking about things a little bit differently. It has a lot of the same benefits of cash and coins. They're tough, they're robust, it's easy to validate. It's very hard to counterfeit a token, despite what people may tell you. They have a very distinctive weight signature. See how they have the little cutouts? By the way, those are old Portland Transit tokens. Those are old Rose City Transit tokens. It's really hard to counterfeit these things. But they have a lot of the same drawbacks as coins. In fact, they're worse than coins in terms of what it costs to collect them. Because number one, you got to buy them. And they're not cheap. When you're buying the tokens from the token manufacturer, they're not $1. They're more. They're expensive because they have to last a really long time. You have the same cost to collect as you do with coins. They have to be collected, dumped, counted, reboxed, and set up to be sold again. It's expensive. And they're heavy, right? A bunch of tokens weighs a lot more than a bunch of paper. And again, you didn't really have any way to do anything operationally. Things like transfers, passes. Tokens weren't going to get that done. You had to have paper transfers. So the Flash Pass was born around about, I'd say, 40s, 50s. You know, it's interesting. There really isn't any book that's going to tell you all this stuff. I just had to kind of research a lot of this stuff myself. So the paper pass, and this kind of includes transfers. This includes Flash passes, multi-ride passes. They actually came into prominence in the 50s, not as a way of offering discounts, right? Today, you buy a 5-trip or a 10-trip pass, you're expecting to get a little bit of a discount because you're buying in bulk. Back then, the whole point was you're going to pay full price for all of these trips, but you get the convenience of not having to have your cash or your token every day. You can just flash this at the operator, okay? And that did make for faster boarding, okay? And it used to be when they were first introduced, the guy would take a little hole punch and he would decrement a ride from your Flash Pass. And then you started getting what are called the unlimited ride passes. And speaking as somebody who worked in Treasury and was responsible for revenue collection, that's one of those things I wish never existed. Unlimited passes are always a problem for one major reason: sharing. If you've got an unlimited monthly pass and you're at home and someone needs to go to the store, here, just take my pass, just take my pass, you can use my pass. In addition, there were a number of other issues with these paper Flash passes. Number one, you get into disputes with drivers, right? People start altering. A 3 looks a lot like an 8. A 1 looks like a 4. You can scrape out the numbers. You can modify the numbers. You can, and this leads to disputes with drivers. And in fact, you can go all the way and just counterfeit the whole thing, which is actually what's right there. Those are some counterfeit Muni Flash passes. It's hard to catch those Flash passes. I mean, you're a bus operator. You got thousands of people boarding your bus every day. You're not going to sit there and look really closely at every one of those passes. Truthfully, the real end of the Flash Pass was the emergence of the color copier, because it was, it was kind of hard to do those color paper pattern passes without the color copier. But once you could go and do color Xeroxes, Flash Pass days were numbered, and there was just so much fraud with these Flash passes. So how do you address that? How do you deal with that fraud? How do you get the drivers out of the equation so that you don't have an argument? I say it's a 3, you say it's an 8. I say it's a 1, you say it's a 4. I say it's expired, you say it's still valid. So that led to the invention of the magnetic stripe paper fare product. These are 2 WMATA fare cards. I'll get back to these soon. This is really a huge leap, okay? Because number one, this actually was really high tech at the time that these were introduced in the late 60s and early 70s, okay? I know most of you guys are way too young to remember. You can ask your parents about this, but back then, computers filled up a room this size and they ran on reel-to-reel tapes, magnetic tapes. So that was the equivalent of a little memory chip right there. That little stripe had data stored on it digitally, right? And that was read by a magnetic stripe reader. That gave you automatic validation. It's not the driver who said your pass is expired. The machine said the pass is expired. The machine doesn't lie, right? So that was a way of kind of reducing those interactions. In addition, you had a lot more flexibility, right? You could encode it as a single ride. You could encode it as a weekly pass, as a monthly pass. And you could also do what's called a stored value purse, right? So if you look at that card on the right, you see the first number is $22, and then every time you use it, it's going to deduct value from that stored value purse and show the new value on there. Seems like a pretty standard normal thing, but that was a really big deal at the time, having this kind of electronic purse. And actually, when you see places with stored value, you'll find that very few people use passes. Because a lot of times, you know, especially these days, I don't want to buy a monthly pass because I might go on vacation for a week, or I might not ride for a week. With stored value, you use it when you need it. So it's become kind of a de facto thing with a lot of electronic fare collection these days. And the other big leap with these mag stripes is these cards are serialized. You can track them. You could look them up. Now, granted, you were looking them up on an antiquated mainframe computer. It was painful using a command line interface. You didn't get great data, but for the first time, they were getting transaction line item data about where people were going. This was the first time people started to recognize the value of electronic fare collection for providing data, which is a hugely important byproduct of doing electronic fare collection. But there were a lot of drawbacks with mag stripe cards. Has anyone here ever ridden BART down in San Francisco, Bay Area Rapid Transit, or Washington Metro? You see the gates, right? Those big gates, and you walk up with that card, and you put it in, and it sucks the card in, and then pops it up on the other side. Does anyone know how the card gets from here to here? It's because you've never seen inside the gate. It's shocking. I thought maybe it was like air pressure, something like that, right? I mean, this is... So when you open up that gate, what is inside there is a huge rubber belt, like a giant rubber band. And it's a very special rubber belt. It's got very special properties for stickiness. It's a little bit sticky. It's not too sticky. It's a very expensive rubber band. And it's running on a series of pulleys with a motor driving it, and it's running at very, very high speed. And that belt is what grabs the card, pulls it into the slot, takes it down. It runs that mag stripe across a mag stripe reader head, which is, it's like an old tape deck, really. Just runs it across that reader head, and then it pops it out that other slot. And before it does that, there's a little printer in there that's going to print the new value on the card. I swear to God, when you look at this, it's a miracle that they work so well. I'm watching this, like, there's no way that works. But they work amazingly well. However, they really, really, really need a lot of maintenance. Every week, somebody has to inspect that belt, take it out, put talcum powder on it, make sure there's no oil on it. You have to inspect all of the pulleys and make sure they're not squeaking, that the bearings are still good. You have to lubricate them. You have to take a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol and climb in there and clean off that magnetic stripe reader head. You got to check the ink in the printer and make sure that it's not printing, the printing is not too light, too faded. You see how half of those numbers on there you can't even read. It's because somebody neglected to do that. This is a ton of work for every one of those gates. So that's why they're really expensive, okay? It's expensive to operate. In addition, there's a lot of drawbacks with magstripe cards from the customer perspective. If they get wet, they're done. If they get anywhere close to a magnet, they're done. And you still have the issue of sharing, people sharing the passes. And when it comes to security, there is none. And I don't mean it's inadequate. I mean, quite literally, the data is encrypted or not encrypted on those mag stripes. If you have the right piece of equipment, you can re-encode any mag stripe card to whatever value you want. And we really don't know how many people are doing that because it's really hard to catch. It looks just like any other mag stripe card. It's pretty scary when you work in Treasury and you don't know. You know people are out there taking money out of your system, but you don't know how much. It's kind of a frightening thing. I'll tell you a quick story about a low-tech way at WMATA. This was about 10 years ago. There was a guy from, I think he was from El Salvador, had like a 5th grade education, pair of scissors and a thing of paste. And he would take a $20 fare card like the one on the right, and he'd cut that mag stripe out and he'd cut it in half. And then he'd take 2 5-cent fare cards and he would paste that mag stripe right down the middle of the other mag stripes. And then he'd trade them in and add a nickel. And he'd get two new $20.05 fare cards because the reader was only reading that stripe in the middle. And then he'd take those 4 and cut them in half and make 8 $20 fare cards, 16, 32, 64, right up to about $300,000 worth of fraud. That's just an estimate. We don't really know how much. That's our best guess. The only way he got caught was people finding curled up mag stripes in the discard bin, saying like, whoa, something funny is going on here. So that's an example of one guy with a pair of scissors and a thing of paste taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of a system. That's pretty scary. So what do you do? What do you replace this with? Well, that led to the introduction of the smart card. So I have a kind of a skeleton version of the smart card here. If you look upper left-hand corner of the card, that's the actual chip. And that ring around the card, that's the antenna. So when you pass that over a reader, the antenna picks up the signal from the reader. The reader actually powers up the chip, reads and writes to that chip. Okay, pretty impressive technology. The modern day smart card, full-featured smart card, has the processing power of a 2nd generation Intel Pentium chip. It's actually a pretty impressive little piece of technology there. Number one, I just told you about how expensive it is to maintain that magnetic stripe transport in a gate, right? You know, the belts and everything else. This reads off of a little solid-state device with no moving parts. If you have a problem with that target, you need a screwdriver. It takes 5 minutes. You swap it out and replace it. So your maintenance costs plummet. Security. This has 32, 64-bit encryption. It is far more secure than any magstripe card could ever dream of being. Yes, 10 years ago in Boston, somebody cracked an early smart card security program. They're much more secure now. You don't really see that happening anymore. You get a lot better data than the old magstripe system. This is a much more modern database that this provides you. You get a lot more information out of it. This is a real hidden benefit of a good electronic fare collection system is for your planning office, for your marketing office. You can learn a lot about your customers. You have a lot more flexibility in terms of your fare products. Maybe you can come up with like 4 or 5 things on a magstripe, but that's about the limit of the technology. You can have hundreds of products that you can put onto a smart card, all kinds of different crazy passes, and you can integrate the transfer into the card so that you don't have to hand out paper transfers. Paper transfers have all the same problems with paper flash passes. You counterfeit them, you fake them, you alter them. They lead to a lot of disputes with the drivers. You go to smart cards, you get rid of paper transfers. It also enables something called account-based architecture. Does anyone know what that means? I'm trying really hard not to geek out too much on you guys here. I'll do my best to explain this to you. Pretty much every smart card system in the United States is what's called a card-based system. That means when you load value to the card, it is actually written on that chip how much value is on the card. When you go to pay a fare at a bus fare box, it's going to read it. Does he have enough value? Yes. Okay, deduct the fare from it, and then it's rewritten and updated back on that chip. But everything is on that chip. In an account-based system, the chip holds a number, and that number is an identifier. And when you tap on a fare box or at a gate, that device is then going to communicate with a back-end system, which is where all of your account information is stored. So it's, you tap on that fare box, the fare box communicates with the central. Does this guy have enough money? Yes, he does. Okay, then I'm going to issue a beep, and he's going to go ahead and board the bus. It is better for several reasons. Number one, if you're loading value online, you get your value immediately, as opposed to a card-based system where your value has to go to the agency central computer, to the bus garage, eventually down to the fare box, and when you tap on that fare box, your money gets loaded to your card. That can take 2 or 3 days. With an account-based system, you load money online, it's there instantly. There are other benefits as well. However, as you can imagine, it is very communications intensive. And you have about 400 milliseconds to make a decision. What if you don't get an answer from the back-end computer? Well, pretty much every agency I've ever seen says, yeah, well, we'll let him ride anyway. And if we find out that he doesn't have any money, we'll put him on the negative list. Terrible, horrible, worst possible way to do fare collection. Put somebody on the negative list, they go add value, the negative list doesn't get updated, now you've got a really pissed off customer. I just loaded money and this thing won't let me ride. So you have to have a really good communications network if you want to do account-based fare collection. But it is something that a lot of agencies are going to. But you're still vulnerable to the sharing, okay? With people sharing passes. And I know it probably doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when you're talking in an agency where you get like, 1.2, 1.5 million trips a day, that can add up really quickly. And it's revenue leaking out the door. And it's not just about the transit agency wants to make money. I mean, they need to have that money to provide good service. And if people are taking that money via fraud, that's less money that's going to provide service to other customers. And it is still expensive to operate. There's a lot of hidden costs that people don't recognize. Some agencies, they go from their mag stripe cards to smart cards. Our ticket vending machines now sell smart cards, not those mag stripe cards. Well, those mag stripe cards are stored on rolls of 3,000. Your average ticket vending machine can hold 15,000 mag stripe cards, okay? Your average TVM can hold about 500 smart cards. Now, you can't have it run out, right? So what does that mean? It means you have to visit it 20 times more often to load the cards into it. And I don't mean you're sending some intern out there to put in cards. You have to send in a team of revenue technicians and police to open up those machines and put that in. That adds up quickly. So there are a lot of drawbacks with this too. It is very expensive to operate. But when you think about it, your smart card can send information, receive information, store information, process information. What do we call a device that can do that? That's called a computer. So the next logical step really is to put the fares on a better computer. And this is the mobile device. I worked with smart cards for 14 years. As soon as I heard about mobile ticketing, I knew I'm done with smart cards. I had a job at Movil a year and a half later. I just think it's a much smarter way to handle things. Number one, you're really getting rid of the costs associated with physical fare media. This is one of the things that nobody ever thinks about when they talk about fare payment systems, smart card systems, is the cost of buying the cards, storing them in a warehouse, encoding them, delivering them, distributing them. All of this costs a lot of money. Get rid of the physical fare media. Fare media is on your device, which people are already carrying. The sharing thing that I talked about, you might give somebody your card to go to the mall, but I have never seen anyone who would lend somebody their phone for 3 hours. It's just not going to happen. There is no sharing with passes on a mobile device. You're reducing the costs to collect the fares. I've yet to do a calculation on what it costs with mobile devices, but it's right around 5–6% really to collect. That's about half the cost of collecting with these other options. The ticket vending machine is built into the device. That's a huge convenience. How many of you have used ticket vending machines? They're horrible. There aren't any good ones anywhere. When I worked inaugurations in DC, I worked 2 inaugurations. The CFO, the chief of staff, the treasurer, the entire finance team was on mezzanines around the city, okay? Obama's second inauguration, we normally did 1.2 million trips a day. It was 1.9 million that day. I spent 14 hours standing in front of a ticket vending machine in a sea of people. How much for you? 2 trips, $10. How much for you? 3 trips, 15, $20, 15, 12, 14 hours. All we did was operate ticket vending machines. And the CFO was right next to me, and the treasurer was at the next one, and the chief of staff was at the next one. That was the best possible thing that we could do, was operate ticket vending machines. If they had a mobile ticketing system, I could have been sitting at home next to the fire, watching the inauguration on TV. None of that would have been required. It's very easy to overwhelm your vendor network. This gets rid of the ticket vending machine. In addition, the mobile device is locationally aware. It knows where you are. And most importantly, it has that 2-way communication. We're talking about account-based fare collection, right? When you have a card and you do an account-based fare collection, the only time that card is communicating with the central computer is when it's touching that device. It's 300 milliseconds. That's like trying to have a conversation with somebody who's passing you in a car going 50 miles an hour. Hey, does this guy have any money? Does this guy have enough? It's really hard. You have this tiny little slice of time to determine all of these factors. The mobile device can be in communication with the central computer all the time. And it knows, I know how much is on this guy's account. Of course I know how much is on his account. He just, you know, it's right here. So it's not so dependent on communications, and you're not taking the chance that you're letting someone in who's not paying, okay? To me, it is a far more sensible way of doing account-based fare collection. So let's talk about some of the other impacts of the mobile device. What's going on these days, okay? These are things that are possible with the mobile device that have not been possible before. I mean, a real basic thing, integrating with a trip planning function, right? That's something that you can do with your mobile device. I need to get from here to here. What's the best way to do it? It can show you the route, and then you can just go ahead and buy your ticket as part of that process. That's a real huge thing for people. My wife went up and used a commuter rail system in Long Island with a mobile ticketing system, and the only thing she had to say was, it's so stupid that you have to use one app to find out where you're going and another one to buy the ticket, right? The integrated trip planning is something that people really like. In terms of data and analytics, it is way better than any card could ever dream of being, because you have that locational awareness. You know where people are when they're buying their tickets. You know where they are when they're using their tickets. Now, we don't push our luck, but it is possible to even know where they're going after they get off the vehicle. We try to be, very careful about tracking customers. But you can find out where they're buying it, where they're using it. You get much, much better data. And in addition, I'm sure some of you have probably heard about mobility as a service, MaaS. It's kind of a buzzword these days. Well, that's only going to happen with the mobile device. Look at all of the different services that are now available. 20 years ago, bus, rail, taxi, right? Now, Uber, Lyft, car share, bike share, on-demand services, bridge, chariot, wings, all of these new modes of transportation that are available to all of you. What do they all have in common? They're all built around the mobile device. Can't ride any of that stuff with just a card. Got to be built around the mobile device. So when you put transit on a mobile device, it allows you to start to integrate with those other services, right? Just an example, think about Lyft, right? Your Lyft driver. Where does he hate to operate? In the middle of a congested city, where it takes him 45 minutes to go 4 blocks, and he gets paid like $7. Yeah, if he had a meter, it would be running backwards. He's actually losing money right there. They never want to pick somebody up in the middle of the city. Where does transit like to operate? Right there. That's transit's wheelhouse. Congested, center city, lots of people, that's where transit makes sense. Uber and Lyft, they like to be way out in the suburbs. You know, those big long trips. Transit does not want to operate way out there in the suburbs where there's miles and miles between the pickups. I'm not saying that they should all be working together, but boy, it sure seems like there's room for both of them to kind of coordinate. And that's sort of the idea of mobility as a service, right? When you think about it, anything that's not a personally owned automobile is mobility as a service. But the idea is, the whole point of mobility as a service is people are getting away from the personally owned vehicles and they're buying their trips individually as transactions, right? As opposed to owning the cow, they're buying glasses of milk, right? If I own a car that I paid $55,000 for and I'm spending $750 a month, you're going to have a tough time getting me on a bus, right? I've made this huge investment. I don't want to, admit that I made a mistake. It's hard to get those people on buses. I spent a long time trying to get people out of cars onto transit. It's hard. You got a much better shot of getting someone out of a car share or a TNC and Uber Lyft and get them onto transit. And so what we're seeing now is we've built applications, for example, that will allow you to put in your origin, your destination, and show you options across different modes. Hey, you could take a streetcar to a car share and walk. You could take a streetcar to a bike share. You could take a streetcar to a bus. You have all these different options that can work across modes. All one booking, all one payment. That's a huge leap in customer convenience, right? Making use of all of these different options. That's mobility as a service right there. That's what people are trying to get to, but there's more to it than that. I'll get back to it. But truthfully, we are just beginning to scratch the surface of the mobile device, okay, of the capabilities that this offers. When we talk about the future, there are some broad trends that are emerging. I can't tell you really what the future is going to be specifically, and anyone who says they can is wrong. But you can point to some broad trends, some things that we see happening, right? In the future, your fare payments are going to be less about individual fare payment transactions. The whole point of the mobile device is it opens that transaction up to the rest of the world, kind of like it connects your fare payment transaction to the internet. Now it can communicate with any system, any place in the world. So, for example, if I'm going to dinner, maybe the restaurant's going to pay for that trip. If I'm going to go have lunch somewhere, maybe they're going to pay for that trip. If I'm going to job training, maybe they're going to pay for that trip. If I'm going to a class, maybe the university is going to pay for that trip, right? There's all sorts of destination beneficiaries who benefit from your mobility. They will pay for the trip, okay? Where I live, Giant Food and Shell have a partnership. If I shop at Giant Food, I get 20% off my gas. That's like, $8, $10 anytime I use that. Giant Food is spending $8 or $10 so that somebody who buys gas at Shell will shop at Giant Food. You think they might want to partner with a transit agency? Cover your trip so that you'll shop at Giant Food? I mean, there's about 100 times as many transit customers as there are Shell gas customers in any given metro area. That's the kind of thing that you're going to see. Your transit fare is going to be like shipping right now on Amazon. You shop around and say, oh, I can get it here. Oh, free shipping. Ha, free shipping. That's my choice, right? You might be shopping for a place to go out. Hey, whoa. These guys will cover the transportation. That's what you're going to start to see, okay? And in the bigger picture, to me, the real benefit of mobility as a service, remember we were just talking about the idea of I need to go from here to here. And it's going to lay out, my app is going to lay out the options for me. Some of these, there's different modes in each option. There's different times associated. There's different costs. But let's look at that at the macro level from a city. What if I'm working for the city of Portland and I've got this app covering this whole city and people are combining modes and looking at all these different options, and I can start to incentivize certain options, more sustainable options, options that have less traffic impact. Maybe there's a bridge that closed and I want to geofence a certain area and say, for the next 5 hours, transit trips are free. Okay? Shared ride trips, half price. Single occupancy vehicle trips, $10 surcharge. Okay? What you're talking about is you're talking about impacting mode shares and mode splits in real time, getting people to modify their behavior. This is what mobility as a service is starting to enable, okay? Transportation demand management has been around for a long time, and it's a tough thing to do to try to get people to change their modes. But now With that kind of tool, okay, transportation demand management can become a real-time relevant activity. You can actually be changing the mode splits in real time. That is something that excites me a great deal. But when you talk about the real future, we're not even close, okay? Look at the leaps of all those fare payment methods that I talked about. Going from the coin to the token, not that big of a leap. Same kind of form factor, okay, we moved the point of sale. Nothing much has really changed since then. From the token to the flash pass, it's convenience. Flash pass to mag stripe, that's a big jump. You got the first digital. Then you go to the smart card and it's okay, well, it's a better digital, it's better data than this. Then you go to the mobile device. And it's like, well, wait a second now. Now we've got a user interface associated with the fare media. Now we've got two-way communication capabilities with anywhere in the world. Now we've got location awareness. That's like 100 times bigger leap than we've ever made. And the fact of the matter is, our imagination has not caught up with it yet, okay? We haven't caught up with that technological leap. What we do as humans, when we get new groundbreaking technology, is we dress it up like the thing that it's replacing so that we can be comfortable with it, right? So when they introduced the first cars, right, they looked a lot like horse-drawn carriages, and they were steered with a tiller. It took a long time before you had an enclosed body, steering wheel, pedals, that kind of stuff. First televisions looked just like radios. And I know, again, I'm probably dating myself here, but the first time I experienced digital music, it was on a spinning plastic disc with the information stored in a spiral, a lot like an LP. That's how you make people comfortable with it. And right now, we're still dressing up the mobile device. Hey, it's a virtual card. The device is emulating a smart card. Doesn't that seem kind of humiliating for a phone, right? It's got so many capabilities. Oh, but could you impersonate a card? I mean, the phone's probably like, yeah, I could. I mean, I could be a rotary phone too if you want. But we still haven't quite caught up with what the technology can do, okay? We're still stuck in this token model. Nothing has changed in 3,000 years, really, okay? Yes, the tokens have gotten more sophisticated. Maybe they're electronic instead of a piece of physical material. And maybe instead of being validated by a human, they're validated by a device. But you're still validating at the point of validation, the point of entry into the system, the point of use. It's all still in the same place. Okay, we separated the point of sale, but we haven't really done anything new and special, okay? So where's that going to come from? I put the sheep up here because I read something recently that a sheep, if you raise a sheep in a pen, once that animal reaches adulthood, you can get rid of the fence, and that sheep will still walk around in that enclosed area as if the fence were still there, because the sheep has no idea what's outside the fence, and he's never going to go outside of that fence, okay? So today, the mobile device has broken down all the walls and barriers around the point of sale, the point of use, the point of validation. But the sheep, me, okay, we're still walking around inside the fence, right? I know my pen of fare collection extremely well, okay? I know every inch of that pen. I know what's possible, I know what's not possible, I know what works, I know what doesn't work. I know my pen, but I've never been outside it. And I'd love to be the guy who dreams up the new generation of fare collection that's going to bust through the token model, but it's probably not going to be me. This is me, okay? My imagination is constrained by my experience. So it could be one of you guys who actually figures this out. It's going to be somebody who hasn't been working in fare collection, who can ask the right questions, and who will have the imagination to finally step outside of our pen and figure out what the future fare collection actually is going to be. And I hope I didn't run under or over, but that's all I got. I'd be happy to take some questions from you folks. Put this here.
Because in your imagination, in the future, the transit fare should be dynamic, different time, different line, have different line.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that's possible. It's absolute. That's one of the things with the mobile device is yes. So with a car, right, with a smart car, with any smart car, when you start talking about different fares for different times of day or different locations, it is really hard to do. It's extremely difficult to do. The logic, I won't say it's impossible, but it's really hard to do. That is an example of something that can happen with the mobile device. You've got to be careful, because if you get too complicated, then you start confusing your customers. Sometimes the goal of these fare collection initiatives is to simplify, but sometimes the goal is to make things more complex. But yes, that's absolutely possible. Yes. This is a really good question. Here's why it's very hard to answer. Because it's funny. I've had these conversations with people at work. Hey, we'd like to talk about how much we can reduce fraud with these agencies. How much fraud do they think? Well, guess what? No transit agency ever goes to publicly tell anyone how much money they got taken. Right? So yeah, when I talk about them getting taken for like $200 or $300, I'm hoping they're not on the web here. But probably, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it's really hard to know how much. And the only thing you can really do, it takes time, but you have to look at the macro numbers. You have to look at what happens to your average fare. The average fare is how many trips you've taken divided by all the money you've collected, right? That gives you one number. That's your average fare. If your average fare is on its way down, that means either a lot more people are using free transfers or you're getting crushed. Now, I can give you one example of that with an analysis of looking at what happened in New York where they introduced unlimited rail passes on the subway. A third of the transit in the United States is in there now. That's pretty astounding. They introduced unlimited passes, which their customers have been clamoring for. Their total revenue went down 10% and their ridership. Yeah. And when you're talking about a system that does 10.5 million trips a day, that's a big improvement. But to answer your question, it's very difficult to quantify. All I can say is I know it's a lot harder to cheat on mobile. One of the things I found with fare evasion is most times it needs to be pretty easy. I've had experience with people figuring out how to game the ticket vending machine and stuff, and that's basically just you can walk up and do things. But when you start talking about the program, a counterfeit app or screenshots or stuff, we haven't really seen that. I think the mobile device is much, much less vulnerable. In my opinion.
So the transit serves a lot of uses. I think one of the most important is providing mobility to more vulnerable populations.
Absolutely.
And in many cases, that might be not having access to a smartphone, not having paid your phone bill on time, not being in a place that has internet access, not having access to a bank account. And there are a lot of different pieces that could be included in there. So, and it seems like one of the big benefits here is shifting the entire system. So as long as there are other systems that still need to exist, as long as you still need the vending machines and everything else, how do you see those things interacting together?
This is a really great question. The unbanked population. Okay, so for starters, I should point out that when I talk about mobile devices and mobile ticketing, it can never be the only option. Don't see us getting rid of cash anytime soon. The reload network is never going to be up to speed out in the suburbs. But what do you do with the underbanked and the unbanked? Now, one thing that we found is in the last 5 to 10 years, the prominence of smartphones in that population has really grown. Okay, 10 years ago, you had to be rich to have an iPhone. Now, when I walk around DC, not to be obnoxious, but there's homeless people on smartphones. All you need is a charger. You get your free Wi-Fi from the library, okay? And a lot of folks, you know, maybe folks who are the working poor, right? They might not have a bank account. They might not have a permanent address, but that mobile device is their connection to the world. That's how they get music. That's how they get games. That's their lifeline. That's their phone number. That's everything. But you're right. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about, you need a credit card. How are you going to put cash into a mobile phone? Now, we have been working on a lot of solutions for how to help people load cash into mobile devices. And there's a lot of options for that. You can work with some of the gift card providers, right? So you walk into a grocery store in the checkout line, you hand them $5, they scan a barcode on your phone, and by the time you get to the door, the money's on your account. It's good, but that's not for everybody, okay? When you're talking about the people who need to pull that $3 basically out of their couch, it's their last $3. Maybe we don't want them to digitize that. So one of the really cool things about the mobile device, and one of the things that we're doing, okay, we've developed a product that allows, say, employers, universities, people like that, to provide transit subsidies for restricted pass products. Like in Portland State, offered you an unlimited pass to ride TriMet, right? They would use our product to manage that. You go through, you assign the benefits, the person received an email, they click on a link, it opens up the person's app, now you're paying for their trips. When it comes to the underbanked and the unbanked, right? If these people are going to job training, somebody will pay for it. If they're going to rehab, somebody will pay for it. If they're starting a new job after training, they'll probably pay for it for the first couple of weeks. If they're going to a medical appointment, somebody will pay for that. So what we're kind of looking at now with mobile, it's less and less about how to squeeze the last $3 out of somebody who barely has that money, and more towards how can all of these other entities pay for that person's trip. And I think that's the real advantage with mobile. When you talk about people subsidizing on cards, you need proprietary devices in all of these different locations, and they have to go and they have to tap the card to get. Somebody could be sitting at a social service agency, and in the space of 3 minutes, they could subsidize all of their week's clients like that. So that's kind of our solution to try to deal with those vulnerable populations. Other questions?
I've got 2 online. Actually, let me just say that we've got a lot of questions about digital questions.
Okay.
Let's say that was very popular.
It's usually the first question I get asked when I demonstrate for a transit agency too.
A couple other things. One asks kind of the technology of how much of a trail does it need in terms of privacy? Are these articles or things to then look to see where someone was based on this app? And then another was, you've got fast pass and cards, or the distance is a lot longer. Could we have something that's that powerful for transit ticketing, or is that just not true?
Okay, let me hit those 2 questions. The first question about privacy. We're very, very careful about privacy in our industry, generally speaking. That's the kind of thing that can kill you. If your customers find out that you're tracking them around, it's real easy to delete it. And there's always other options. So we're real careful. We tread very lightly on that. You can turn off location on the device. There are benefits to having location enabled, like integrated trip planning, but you can certainly turn that off. Now, the question about can police get that information? I was actually the custodian of records at Metro. I used to go to court and testify on smart trip records that would put criminals at the scene of a crime and things like that. Police can get anything they want with a subpoena, okay? If they have a subpoena because you've been charged with a crime, yeah, they can get your records. I don't know if we've ever had to deal with that here in Portland, but it probably will show up at some point. If there is a subpoena, yes, they are able to do it, just like with your toll transponders. If there is a subpoena, yes, they will be able to get to those records. That's just the law. Now, what you're talking about with the far field communications, right? How a transponder, you can drive through a toll gantry and it's going to charge you that toll. As a matter of fact, One of the things that we're demonstrating right now and showing people is what we call our mesh technology, right? Right now, we're still in that phase of imitating smart cards, where you walk up and you tap on a target, right? Just like a smart card, yay. Okay, so what we're building now with this mesh technology is a system where the phone can stay in your pocket. So when you walk up to those gates, as if by magic, they open right in front of you. And maybe your phone buzzes twice to let you know that the fare has been paid. What we're talking about is eliminating as much as possible the friction between you and that transportation. So yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a perfect example that I give people about what needs to change in transit. For God's sakes, for 50 years, you pulled up to a toll gate and you put coins in and it lifted up, right? Now, you pay your toll and you just drive through the gate. How is it that I still need to walk up to a fare gate and tap something in order to open the pack holes? Now, I will tell you something that you may not know about those holding systems. Those are not real-time systems. And sometimes it takes 7 days for those transactions to get from that toll plaza back to your account. When you run out of money, you don't find out about it for 2 weeks and you keep driving. That's how you get those news stories about the people getting a knock on their door and a $15,000 bill and a subpoena from the sheriff. So there are a number of issues with those systems. Anything else? Yes.
Whenever you're talking about integrating their local choice and what people talking about, it sounds a lot like what I experienced in California. If I'm leaving the airport and you see Google, or I might get on Google and you see like what my options are, and sometimes there's like 911 Uber, like there's many times when I come here and they see like not a couple dollars off or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that municipalities or like transit agencies, if there's any need for partnership with people that are already doing that, or is people closed off to like public partnership?
Probably shouldn't speak directly to Google, but yeah, what you're seeing with those options that are made, so what we try to do is integrate, because what you're talking about is basically a look, right? You're looking at your different options, but it doesn't include maybe the booking and the payment, right? There is absolutely room for partnerships with transit agencies. It's essentially the interface for the customer, right? Who's going to provide that interface? Some cases it may be Google, some cases it may be other providers, maybe us. But what we also find out is, when I talk about like that urban control panel that's going to be, that could be a transit agency, that could be a council of governments, that could be a city government. Or in a lot of cases, we've had people say to us, guys, we can't run that. We need you to run that for us, which you have to do. But yeah, there's a real, it's one of the things about transit. There's nothing you can say that applies to every system. As soon as you think that you've got something that will have universal appeal, you find out that half the agencies out there totally disagree. So it's kind of hard to say. Anything else?
Thanks so much.
Wow. All right.
Sign-in sheet, can I get that? Anyone want to sign in?